Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, brought to you by Techstrong and Checkpoint. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting webinar ahead, but first I have just a couple of housekeeping notes. First, today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our seminar, or you'd like to rewatch or listen later, share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, we want you to send those in using the Q&A tab on the right side of the screen. That's also where you're going to find the chat tab. This is where we want you to engage with the rest of your fellow audience members. Let us know your thoughts. Just engage with us there. And if you check out our handout section, also on the right side of the screen, you will find a couple of links and materials to help aid with today's webinar. And finally, before we close, we will be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around till the very end. So our topic today is Beyond Unification, How CNAP Should Reduce Cloud Security Risk. And I'm joined today by Yuval Shori, Head of Cloud Security Product Management at Checkpoint Software Technologies. Yuval, thank you so much for being here with me. I'm going to let you take it away from here.
Thanks, Cody, and thanks for having me. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who joined. We will discuss today quite a transition we see in the market around CNAP. And CNAP has been a thing for quite some time now. And at the same time, it got traction and tons of customers started using it. A lot of gaps in terms of what it solves and what it does not showed up. And we're constantly talking to customers and trying to make sure that we're doing the best thing that we could from a product and solution perspective, really solving the hairiest problems that keep them up at night. And it's very clear that we have to focus not on just spewing everything that we could tell a customer from a, hey, this is wrong, this is misconfigured, this is where you could do better, but instead focusing customers on risk. Let's, prior to talking about the challenges themselves, let's look at what are we seeing now and what are we seeing from let's say a delaying factor perspective. Everything is now changing from an IT and IT security perspective, and everything is what we call times 100 with the shift to the cloud. We see tons of people involved in going into production. We see assets distributed across the organization, across multiple cloud providers, across a hybrid set of on-premise data centers and cloud-based data centers, tons of different types of applications, of course, with different security classification, and based on that, the risk that it actually introduces into the organization. And one of the factors that we see also from a 100x perspective is the speed at which change occurs. And for those of you who are long timers in the IT industry, you probably remember that back in the days, deploying a new application was a matter of months. You had time to design, you had time to restructure the network, and you also had time to kind of get used to new applications being deployed. And some of you might remember a term called change maintenance window, which means that we had like tons of time when we uploaded new versions of the application. It's no longer where we're at. Change occurs at a much, much higher speed that sometimes we want to, but it is what it is. And at the same time, our adversaries do not stay uninvolved. And since the risk is heightened, we also see a lot of activity. And I'm sure that that the new buzzword now is like Log4j or Spring4Shell, and these things are actual risks that make use of the fact that that everything is times 100 to try and find those cracks in our environment. And this is where we're going to focus our session today. When we look at how our customers, and I'm sure that your organization is very similar, when we look at how you and other customers build the environments, it's all about, building the infrastructure and the network security infrastructure, and then putting tons of what I refer to as cloud cogwheels on top of it. It could be virtual machines, it could be containers, it could be serverless functions. These all make what we refer to as the workloads. And when we talk to executives within our customer base, it's a lot about, I'm not 100% sure what, how many cogwheels do I have? I know that I have a lot. For me as a CIO, for me as a CISO, a lot of customers say what I'm interested in is making sure that the web interfaces and the APIs are always on. And the reason we kind of separate web interfaces from APIs, although they're both kind of web interfaces, is because usually customers refer to web interfaces as a mean to get users, customers, to access their systems. But at the same time, we also have supply chain digitization, where APIs is taking the front seat in terms of this is how information flows between supply chain partners. And of course, again, back to our adversaries, if everything flows through these two vectors, they will try to attack these vectors as much as possible. Now, from a change perspective, everything today is deployed through a CI/CD pipeline, be it a firewall, be it a network configuration, be it a completely new environment. And of course, within this environment, the different cogwheels I refer to as pieces of the workload, but also the application itself. What we see that customers do is actually lay a couple of layers of capabilities kind of infrastructurally below them. First being posture management, which is a big part of CNAP, but at the same time, something that kind of runs in parallel, which is more of the cloud security intelligence part that says, okay, I know that I have a running application. Let me look at traffic flows. Let me look at how accounts are being used and accessed across the organization. This is very centric on the entire cloud infrastructure piece. We also saw that there's a lot of focus on the development lifecycle. And I think that one of the challenges that security people face today is the fact that things go slower on the security side because they, in a way, became a little bit of a choke point because, DevOps deploy things, developers code things, and they push it into almost like a staging ready or even a production ready environment. And it's too late because then again, the SecOps team kind of becomes a choke point. This is, by the way, why Check Point acquired recently Spectral, which is a company that focuses on the entire development lifecycle. A company that actually allows a true shift left of, something, if we could secure the code, if we could write the code and enable the developers as they want to do good things, if we enable them to write code in a secure manner, that will actually make the entire system more secure as it gets ready to become production. Now, again, CNAP on its own is a unified platform, and we see multiple players doing very well, of course, including ourselves in this space. But it's not just that, right? We see manual configurations that sometimes are being missed or being identified after the fact, and we see a lot of misconfigurations within the environment, a lot of excessive permissions. We see a growing number of alerts, and we understand that there are not enough people in the organization to really attend to each and every alert, which is definitely something I'm going to focus on. And we see that those constant development cycles constantly also introduce new vulnerabilities, abilities for malware to get deployed as part of the new code deployment. If someone didn't make sure there are no secrets in the code, sometimes it leaks, and there are tons of situations where it got to the news where a company actually exposed its CSP, its cloud service provider API keys in GitHub or something similar, which actually exposes the organization itself. Last but not least, there's tons of complexity and lack of visibility that SecOps team have into what is going to deploy, what is deployed, which leaves tons of security gaps unattended. Now let's look at what this actually brings and what complexity it introduces. Today, when we talk to security teams, they're very frustrated as they're failing to eliminate the riskiest threat. Again, back to the number of alerts, they say I have tons of things I have to attend to, but what is the riskiest thing I have to attend to? They get to a state we call alert fatigue. At the same time, they don't have enough resources to tackle each and every alert, which eventually leads to, as I said earlier, unattended risk. And a lot of teams feel like as if they're in the middle of a whack-a-mole game where an alert pops, they hit it on the head, but then another one pops up, and again, they're not sure what to do. The next challenge is around identity management. It remains impossible, and one of the risks is that, or maybe one of the challenges is that permissions are still configured manually, set up by developers, set up by DevOps engineers, and the SecOps team knowledge around what's really needed for an application to operate is still kind of based on the trust between developers, DevOps, and SecOps, and not something that the security team really has information about. There's also no visibility into, hey, you know something, what's really needed? What is the delta between what's needed and what is currently provisioned within the system? Next is, how do we get visibility? And a lot of customers try to deploy agents within each and every cogwheel, within each and every VM or container, in order to get true deep visibility into what they have. It's complex. It's tons of, again, yet another small pieces of code and small pieces of software to manage within each and every virtual machine or container, with a huge cost to it, both from a performance perspective, because if you have a piece of software that requires compute power, it is going to raise the cost from a CSP perspective, but also from a OpEx perspective, it's costly. You need people to manage it, right? So we want to make sure that we enable our customers to really be innovative and not inhibitors to innovation, and at the same time kind of reduce the friction between DevOps and the security teams, and last but not least, provide them with the visibility without the increased cost. One challenge that I think is people look at shift left almost as a technology term. I see it as an organizational change term. There are a lot of things that happen very fast on the dev and DevOps side. They're much more agile than where we see security teams today. And part of it is the CI/CD process, which is on one hand very fast, but there are security gaps that remain unattended to. Actually, the fact that you have those kind of entry points from the CI/CD process itself opens up a plethora of new cracks that adversaries try to insert their malicious activity through. And one of the things that we see is that we have to enable the rest of the team from a security perspective, because again, developers want to do the right thing. They want to code securely. They're not always capable of. They not always know what to do exactly. And we want to make sure that this risk is being reduced as we enable other other parts of the organization to really do things securely from the get-go, and not as you are ready to go into production. Now, the first thing that we're very focused on is everything that we're doing these days has a piece of machine learning and AI. And the reason is, and I'm going to give you an example from the Checkpoint life. Checkpoint itself, as an organization, is actually a customer of ours, right? It's where we call it eating our own dog food. And the amount of alerts we get every day is so huge, because machine changes and machine are added and code is added and changed, and you don't know really like what's the state of something you have to really use the most of what you could do from an AI perspective. And when you use AI in the right way, you really turn tons of data, tons of alerts into actionable insights. And the more data you have, the more accurate the machine. When we talk about the more data we have, it's not just the data you have within your organization, but assuming that your cloud security vendor is a leading one with thousands of customers, and your cloud vendor sees tons of data coming from these customers, actually the machine that is going to provide for reducing the risk is going to be more accurate and kind of smarter. And at the same time, machine learning removes human error, teaches the machine how to prioritize, and help the human side to actually prioritize based on very actionable insights, as I said earlier. Now, what does it mean to use AI to weaponize CNAP as we talk about about just the plethora of things we have? We have tons of tools. We use AI in order to really gain insights, as I said, from these alerts. Do we have any critical vulnerabilities? Do we have any misconfigurations? Do we have any anomaly? I talked about threat intelligence in the cloud world, where I truly want to look at, hey, does this make sense that I have so much traffic coming from this region of the world? Or does it make sense that someone that usually connects from an area with these set of permissions is now trying to be a super user coming from a hacker-infested country in the world? All these things are insightful, but still it's not enough. And what we believe we must do from an AI perspective is, on one hand, take all those contextual inputs, look at what cogwheels, what workload pieces do I have, but look at this from a topology perspective. Does it have active protection or not? Does it have active services or not? Does it face the internet, or is it in a lab or staging environment? By doing so, we can definitely understand what is the exact attack surface, what are the attack paths, but also help customers remediate in the right prioritization based on kind of narrowing down everything that you see here, including business inputs. Because again, one application from a business priority perspective is not equivalent to another. And I'm going to get into it in a couple of more slides. So the question is, okay, how do you actually build a risk score? What does it mean to have a risk score within the system? So when you look at your system, you want to look at it from a security perspective as an attack surface. Like, what is the exposable attack surface? And the way you do it, you actually take all the attack paths, all the ways that adversaries could get into your system, and make a single attack surface from it, but also provide an attack path a specific risk score. So on one hand, the wider your attack surface is, the riskier your system is. But at the same time, because we want to prioritize what attack path do I resolve first, I want to give those attack paths a risk score each. And this is, as I said, is given through an AI engine, but it also tells you, like, what asset do you have, making those attack paths. So now not only you could prioritize, what attack path you want to resolve, but also look at what asset do I want to attend to first in order to what risk this asset in first of all the attack paths. Last but not least, I always jokingly say, and I'm in the IT and systems industry and security industry for probably too many years, but I always say, the reason that we invented things like scripting languages is because, not just because we're lazy and we don't feel like copying and pasting the same command again, but instead we want to do things fast with a minimal amount of resources. And that is exactly why we came up with something called minimal effective dose, which is, I know that I need to resolve an issue in this attack path or in this system, but I want the AI engine to also recommend which is, or maybe automatically remediate which resolution will be the easiest to perform. And by doing so, we'll see something like, listen, you can do this to resolve the security risk. You can do this to resolve the security risk, but actually this is much better because it's shorter in terms of how long it's going to take you and how complex this process is, and also how many resources it's going to take from your team. What we're doing with this, we're actually empowering security to take back control. We educate the machine to remove the need for manual decision-making. We look at all those security insights and bring context into it and focus on things that matter to the business. And I'll give an example. If you have the same vulnerability, say log4j on your application server, on your web server, but one of the systems is part of a production internet-facing environment, and at the same time, it also it's the cash cow of the organization, right? This is where you get your orders through. And at the same time, you have a staging machine or a lab machine that has the same vulnerability. But of course, from a business priority, it is not the same business priority. These factors are going to get into the calculation that the AI machine makes in order to make sure that you understand that you have to take care of the production system, order taking tool or system ahead of time. It doesn't mean that you don't need to attend to the lab environment, but from a prioritization perspective, I have one person that is currently free to do something. I want them to be focused on the production system that, if hurt, if attacked, actually will put a plug into my cash flow. I want to take care of that first and only then attend to the lab system. Does it mean that, in the time being, I won't find another vulnerability? Yes, but the system constantly prioritizes the remediation actions and the risk actions or the risk factors in order to constantly provide you a prioritized issues, prioritized risks that you need to attend to, and again, with the minimal effective dose to make sure that you are taking that in the right order. Entitlement. Entitlement is sometimes a black box, or some would say a black hole for some companies, as a lot of the permissions are being provisioned by people who, with not knowing what exposure they're adding, actually is sometimes over provisioned. And when we look at where customers want to go towards from a zero trust perspective, from a minimal set of permissions deployed into the system, we have to establish an effective policy for every asset. And we have to establish an effective policy for every user in the system, for every role in the system. And that is exactly what we believe that a system must do from a least privilege access enforcement. So you have a user, great. You have another user, great. They do the same thing, maybe instead of managing them separately. And by doing so, adding complexity, adding resources, we actually need to put them into a single group, a single role, and just manage this role. And maybe it's not 2, maybe it's 200, right? If you have 200, 500, 1,000 developers, instead of just managing each separately, maybe I can do it in a single role. And this is critical to look at this from this is what my users are allowed to do, or my user accounts are allowed to do. This is what the system needs. This is the delta, and then provide the ability, to deploy a new policy without affecting the application itself and its ability to run, but also provide some guardrails and get alerts when those guardrails are not being kept. And maybe also, as I said earlier, automatically remediate. Last but not least, as I said earlier, shift left is an organizational shift. Developers, DevOps engineers, they make what's referred to as micro decisions day in, day out, and hundreds of these. You want to make sure that as they make those decisions, something tells them it's the right decision, it's the wrong decision, again, from a security perspective. If we do not do this, what happens is that everybody gets ready to move into production, And just a minute before going into production, the security team that almost acts as a bouncer to understand, like, should it go into production or not, from an exposure perspective, from a risk perspective. If you don't solve it very early in the game, this bouncer is going to have a very long line considered as a choke point. And what you have to deploy, you actually have to deploy tools that not only shift left the security capabilities early on, but it actually uses creative solutions in order to empower first the visibility, and then also empower the ability of developers and the ability of DevOps engineers to really take care of issues before it even becomes, something that is deployed to the lab. And if it's not deployed to the lab, it's not going to be deployed into the staging environment. If it's not going to be deployed in the staging environment, it's not going to be deployed in the production environment. So by doing so, actually, we enable those developers and DevOps engineers to secure the system even prior to going production. Now let's talk about, okay, we know what we need. Now, how do we do it the CloudGuard way? The focus from a CloudGuard perspective is to ensure that we deliver an automated cloud-native security capability from code to cloud. When someone starts coding, there is a chance there's going to be malware. There's a chance they're going to use maybe a third-party library that has vulnerability. Maybe they misconfigured something within what they're working on. And you want to provide a unified capability across everything that you have: applications, workloads, network infrastructure, network security infrastructure. But I think that what differs us from some of the other vendors and solutions is not only the sheer unification of the platform. And we said unification, this is how I started. Unification is something that we already went through. Some of the market already went through, but actually we have to make sure that it doesn't stop there. You have to manage risk. Nobody cares if you have 100 alerts or 3 alerts. What matters is what these alerts do, quote unquote, from a risk perspective to your entire system. You want to be able to maintain posture, the right posture, and you want to be very preventive from a threat perspective in order to make sure you operate at the right cloud speed and scale. And as I opened today, it's all at 100x. And I totally believe that it is going to continue accelerating, because as we see the market, it's cloud is not just comfortable, or it's not just a way to save capital expense and shift it into OpEx, but instead it is something that we're going to see growing as companies and customers are going to strive to really stay functional in a situation where everything just shifts, everything just works so fast, and we have to respond to it also from a security perspective. When we look at the entire family of what we do, we focus on 3 main areas. One is the infrastructure itself. Checkpoint, you might know, came from the network security space, supporting whatever type of cloud you have, be it public, hybrid, or private cloud. Next thing, if you remember the block diagram I started with, next thing is how do we secure the workloads? How do I secure the containers, the serverless functions, the VMs? How do I secure the web applications on top of it? And I think that one of the things that really differentiates us from most of the other vendors is that we do not stop at the workload itself, but we understand the web application, be it a customer user-facing web application or an API-driven application for supply chain digitization. We have to put something there, and we were one of the first companies, if not the first at all, to say, something, you actually need a web application and API platform as part of your workload system. And of course, unsurprisingly, we use AI within it. By the way, and I think that the proof is in the pudding, because when our customers we're seeing tons of traffic around Log4j on every newspaper, on every forum. Customers that actually use an AI-driven integrated system within their cloud environment, they were not even concerned, as it stopped it through the AI engine itself. So yes, customers that used our own AppSec web application protection platform weren't even affected by neither Log4j or Spring4 Shell because of the sheer investment in AI that we're putting in. Last but not least, the pipeline protection. If you remember, again, in the block diagram, you have like the CI/CD area, and this is how things are being deployed today. And we have to secure everything there. You have to secure the repository. You have to secure the different types of tools that developers use in order to secure it completely from the get-go and not wait until they're ready to go live. From a services perspective, everything's scanning, right? Making sure that you have the right container image, you have the right container repository, your functions are looking good, your virtual machines are looking good. When you build systems through IAC, and today it amazes me, again, I'm an old school guy that used to carry servers into the server room as we were building new application infrastructure. Today, with a push of a button, you could create a completely new quote-unquote data center based on a single template from within IAC. And if actually the IAC template is misconfigured, the same mistake is going to be repeated across each and every new virtual data center you're going to deploy. So this is why it's critical to make sure that the templates that you're using, that the IAC code that you're using is actually something that you want to deploy, also from a security perspective. Last but not least, from a scanning perspective, you want to make sure that everything that you have is constantly being scanned for any leaked secrets. And I couldn't stress enough how critical it is for customers to look into what they have from a code perspective, make sure that no one added some authentication information to the code, maybe as a debugging capability, or maybe as part of the development, saying, well, I'll attend to it later when I'm going to secure it, and then did it. And then the same API key or the same authentication information is actually staying stale within the code. So everything that you see here is what we scan for across the entirety of the infrastructure and across the entirety of the workloads, and of course also as things go through the pipeline. And yes, you need to secure the pipeline itself, but you also need to secure what goes through the pipeline. And secret scanning is just one, but an important part of how do you secure what goes through the pipeline itself. Next, not surprising, because we're talking about CNAP. We're talking about everything that we need to look at. What's the posture of the system? What identities do I have? Do I have the right entitlement? We talked about this. We talked about this a minute ago. But at the same time, add this intelligent part that says, okay, as I said earlier, I have something running. I want to look at the activity and find anomalies there. And those anomalies are being detected from two different directions. One is traffic anomalies. Again, do I see the right set of traffic? If all of my customers are UK-based, if all of my customers are in Asia Pacific, why do I see now 2 terabit per second information coming from my system towards an IP address or a network in an unattended to country? Does it mean that something happened? Well, again, the AI engine is using tons of multiple factors, including Checkpoint's own threat cloud, which is one of the largest threat research environments in the world, to make sure that those anomalies are real. So I'm not filling your inbox and or the dashboard with false positives, but at the same time, learn over and over again and kind of refine and introduce the right alerts as we move forward. And I remind you, one of the things I said earlier, the more data you feed the machine, the more accurate it gets. from a worldwide perspective, but also from a how does your specific environment looks like. So it's great that a threat might be relevant from a worldwide perspective, but might be that the anomaly that we're using in order to identify a specific threat might be that this is how, or it looks similarly enough to what's happening in your network, because this is how your application is built. So you want to make sure you also get like a local insight, a local version, if you might, of how does it look within your environment. So intelligence doesn't become a burden, but instead becomes something that enables you to focus. And everything that we do, everything that we now look into has the risk factor into it. And I think that we talked earlier about effective risk management. I'm going to touch it a bit more as we go forward. Pardon. We just have to deliver everything that you see here. And this is how we kind of transition our current offering. It's not just spewing tons of attacks or attack information, spewing tons of alerts towards the operator, but instead prioritizing it around risk, prioritizing it around what really should I attend to from the get-go, instead of, hey, you have 80,000 alerts, new alerts that emerged in the last 24 hours. Let's go one by one. No, instead of going one by one, I want to be very risk focused. I want to say, I want to tackle this first one in the list, because this one is actually going to reduce the higher level of risk. And by doing so, I'm going to secure my system the most. So as I was referring to earlier, this is how our cloud environment looks like. But at the same time, we're actually adding effective risk management to it. So it kind of oversees everything. It looks at everything from a cloud infrastructure entitlement management or KIM that says, is everything here configured the way I would like it to be? But at the same time, we're providing the agentless workload capabilities that look deeper into the virtual machines without the cost of an agent, in order to provide visibility into everything that you have, right? And by actually doing these three things, first, we allow you to focus on the alerts that really matter. We talked about alert fatigue and resource strain. We want to make sure that no risks are left unattended, because we see tons of alerts. We want to reduce everything to, again, risks that matter, issues that matters. It's not this single alert, but it's actually this alert, the topology of your system, the business priority of the system, and 10 more additional alerts that happen at the same area at the same time, in order to, as I explained earlier, assign a risk score to every attack path, and use AI to not only understand what the actual risk is, but also to recommend the minimal effective dose action that you need to take in order to tackle the most risky issues with the least amount of resources and resolve things as fast as possible. And what you see here is actually a transition we're taking our dashboard through, and everything, of course, is clickable, and you could do, you could start delving into things. But instead of just telling you what's wrong, we're telling you what risks you have to attend to, right? And you see it here. I think that one thing I would like to focus on is perimeter assets. Perimeter assets that have a high risk, meaning they're exposed to the internet. And it's not just, yet another lab machine that might have, might be still going through an upgrade or deployment, but instead it is something out there that an adversary could attack, and you want to make sure that they can't, right? So looking at this, maybe I should click here and start double clicking into what I have here and look at my top remediation tasks, but first focus on those perimeter assets with high risk, and not on everything that has high risk. Is the perimeter thing the only thing I want to focus on? Maybe, maybe not. But again, from a risk calculation perspective, I can definitely highlight where the most risk is coming from. And we probably understand that external systems are more prone to be attacked. And if they're in a state of high risk, you want to make sure that you're not allowing an adversary to attack it. Next, Kim. As we talked about manual configured permissions, we talked about the knowledge gaps. What we're actually adding into CloudGuard is the ability to build a zero trust identity model. We're doing it through first visibility into entitlements. Hey, this is what you have configured. This is what all your users could do. This is what a specific user could do. And we could, you as an operator could actually kind of take a tour across your permission model and see where do different users and roles could go. But definitely what we're looking at is building a best practice set of permissions, or a best practice permission model that is based on what privilege levels your users need based on their activity in the system, and adjust it as we go. And the reason I refer to it from an as we go perspective, remember the CI/CD pipeline? Remember the bracket, the frame that said development lifecycle? Applications don't stay stale. You want to make sure that if a new application is being deployed, you will be able to understand what type of permissions it requires in order to make sure you change those guardrails, you change those deployed policies in order to allow, and again, allow might be increase the permission, or maybe this is kind of the dream, reduce the permission because you change the application and now you don't need this permission. Actually, you could reduce the attack surface from an identity, from a user permission perspective or a role permission perspective by reducing permission. So this is not something that you do once. Everything that you saw here is something that needs to be done constantly. Last but not least, if I have a best practice model, if someone violates it, I want to detect it. I want, if someone over provisions something to an over permissive entitlement situation, I want to get an alert and optionally also automatically remediate it as the system goes. Again, depends on where the system is. Is it perimeter? Is it not exposed to the internet? And what have you. But you want to have these capabilities to automatically do things as you go in order to reduce the attack surface. And everything that we're focused on is reducing risk, reducing the attack surface, because as we do it, we actually allow security operation teams to be more agile, and we allow them to focus on what really matters and kind of bridge the knowledge gap. Again, here from a permission and entitlement perspective, in other places from a risk versus business priority perspective. One of the things we're very focused on is agentless. We understand again that there's a lot of friction between DevOps and SecOps around the deployment of security agents within those different cogwheels, being virtual machines or serverless functions or containers. And we do understand that in order to get to a very strict or very high level of security, you might not be able to completely not work with agents, especially when you want to have like runtime protection, especially when you have like something running on your VM or container or serverless function to really look at what's happening and stop bad things as they happen. But not everyone is there. Not everyone wants to run an agent on their system, especially when you have, as I talked about earlier, like a web application, an API protection system that uses AI and could actually stop it at the gate. You don't want to pay the extra operational expenses and the compute expenses around deploying agents and managing them, which is exactly what agentless workload posture is all about. A way to get deep visibility into what you have within the system without the need to rely on other teams to deploy agents, without the need of other teams to actually pay for the cost of the agent, again, from both a complexity perspective and a compute perspective. And the way that we do it actually introduces no changes to the workloads or no impact on performance. So once you have, you could kind of enjoy the benefits of both worlds. On one hand, get deeper visibility into what's the operating system security posture, what is the status from a vulnerability perspective? Do I have any critical vulnerabilities within a specific virtual machine? Do I have malware running? Do I have secrets leaked? And do all this without deploying an agent, without change the workload, without change the performance of the workload. This is exactly what our customers are asking, and this is exactly what we are delivering as we speak. Last but not least, from a benefit perspective, from a solution perspective, is definitely why we acquired Spectral.io. Developers, as I said earlier, creating new code, they're doing it faster than what we security peeps can keep up with, and it actually creates security gaps. It creates a situation where secrets are leaking, new risks are being introduced as new code being deployed. And what Spectral developer first platform is delivering, it actually couples security with code, provides the secret scanning capability, and doing it as they automate things at build. They do it as they eliminate those blind spots and make sure that you have the right policies throughout the SDLC. And at the same time, it enables and empowers the developer to write code more securely, enables and empowers the DevOps team to deploy systems more securely, but also prevent us, the SecOps team, from becoming a choke point, right? And this is critical from not just from how do I look in the organization, but how do I perform? How do I support the need for agility and business transformation within my organization? If I use, quote unquote, everybody within the organization to be an enabled agent of security, I actually could get to a secure state much faster. So to summarize, everything that you want CNAP to do must be enabled through the introduction of AI wherever you can get it from, right? And we're it's not sprinkling, we're actually inserting AI capabilities across the board and focus everything to a risk point of view. So instead of, again, just telling you have alerts, you have risks. And the risk is not a single alert, it's 5, 10 alerts combined, aggregated through the AI engine and the machine learning engine together, and allow you to prioritize everything from a risk point of view, provide you with deep visibility into those cogwheels that really make your workloads, and not just in a specific area, but also do it with the least investment of cost and complexity, and simplify things as you get very deep visibility into the assets that you have running. We talked about establishing a zero trust model from a permission model on top of your infrastructure, on top of your, again, how those virtual machines, containers, serverless, whatever have you, from a cogwheel perspective, how do I actually reduce the attack surface from an entitlement perspective and establish zero trust? And I think the last thing, and you saw it kind of across the board, is fast remediation. The ability to automatically remediate, or at least provide you with a recommendation that is very much focused on minimal effective dose. What is the minimal set of steps that I need to take in order to remediate something, in order to make sure I maximize the use of my resources as I retire most of the risk. So Cody, I'm going to refer back to you and see if we had any interesting questions that that we need to answer?
So we did receive a couple of questions. Our first one reads, is this applicable to private cloud at on-prem?
I do see two interesting questions here that I would like to answer. One question was, is this applicable to private cloud at on-prem? Some of it is very much depending on how your system is deployed. Some of it is not, and I think that it would make total sense. I do not see the name of the person who asked this, but more than happy. Reach out to us. You have our information in the webinar material. More than happy to see how this is applicable to an on-prem private cloud. But as I said earlier, we understand that customers are not 100% on-prem or 100% in the cloud. There's a hybrid model that we are supporting, and this is exactly where it very much depends on how things are looking from your side of things. More than happy to answer this as we get contacted by you. Another question, and I'm happy that this was the question because it seems that I managed to kind of create some kind of traction. Great. Someone, again, I can't see the name. Where can we find information on a free trial, and what is the licensing model for these features? If you actually go to the Hands-out tab, first you have a PDF that talks about how do you get a free trial of CloudGuard, and as we add these capabilities and others, you would just see them in the system. And also there's a buyer's guide that explains what is the licensing model, how should you plan on budgeting for this. And I think one of the interesting things is that we have multiple customers that actually told us, and I'm when I usually look at ROI documents, I always kind of question it. Is it real? Really, are we saving money? We have tons of customers which are saving money through the implementation of CNAP, but also through the implementation of those advanced AI skills that we brought into the system. And I think, again, the Log4j example I gave earlier, and Log4j and Spring4Shell, both are the same from how our customers were protected against. If you were hit, quote unquote, not attacked, but when I say hit, it's just if your system was vulnerable and you found yourself in a mice race trying to just remediate everything very fast and replace packages and bring systems down and bring systems up and upgrade everything as you go, and as people were totally stressed. If you have a system that uses AI in order to reduce your risk and focuses on risk instead of focusing on filling your inbox with additional alerts, or filling a dashboard with additional alerts, this is how you save money. This is how you refocus your entire security team in order to make sure that they're focused on what matters, and also they focus the rest of the organization on what matters. Because if you're a DevOps engineer and a SecOps engineer comes and says, well, you need to fix like this critical vulnerability in a disconnected, not running lab environment, and they push you hard and say you have to finish it by today, the end of the week, or whatever, how much credibility are you going to give them? Because again, it's a lab environment, it's disconnected. But how much credibility are you going to give a SecOps engineer that would come and tell you, listen, this vulnerability is something you have to take care of today, because I know it's a perimeter environment. I know that it is something that you have to take care of from a criticality perspective, business priority perspective. That is that is the essence of how we actually enable SecOps to work better across the organization, across the entire life cycle, and across different roles, be it developers, DevOps, and other SecOps team. So if there aren't any additional questions,
so thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to quickly remind our audience that this session was recorded. So following this webinar, you will receive an email with a link to access the recording on demand. You can also find the recording living on the DevOps website. Just visit devops.com/webinars and be sure to look in the on-demand section. It will be waiting for you. So onto those 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Our first winner is Mika T. Our second winner is Josephine S. Our third winner is Mohammed A. And our fourth and final winner is Kiriaki A. So to the 4 of you, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. But if you don't happen to see that email, please check your spam folder. Yuval, thank you so much for being here with us. I would like to thank Checkpoint for sponsoring today's webinar and making this possible. And before we close, I would like to thank you, our audience. We really appreciate you spending time with us today. We ask for one extra moment to fill out a brief post-webinar survey that will pop up on your screen here in just a moment. But otherwise, we do hope to see you at an upcoming Techstrong Learning workshop or webinar. Everyone, have a great rest of your day.